What's up, YouTube? Hope you guys are all doing excellent today. My name is Joshua Bates. I am a visual effects compositor, photographer, Photoshop, digital artist sort of person. Today we are going to be taking a look at making a photo like this one on the right from this one on the left. So let's get into it. So this photo took, I don't know how many hours to edit, so I don't know if I will go, we might have to speed up some of the process or skip some of the boring stuff, but I will make sure to show you guys like how I do each individual step, so you will have all of the knowledge needed to make a complete photo like this. So this photo, first off, we've got to give credit where credit is due. Our model for this photo is Steffie Harner. She is super cool. Go check out her Instagram. She has a ton of cool stuff. The photographers, Steffen, I hope I'm saying your name right, Yoshiki, and Grip King Jamie on Instagram. Both worked on this set of photos. So I did a little bit of basic color adjustment in Lightroom, so I got from here to here, and then after this point I took it into Photoshop and I did all of these high-tech heads-up display screens, sci-fi screens, whatever you want to call them. We mask her out, which takes quite some time, especially around the hair. And then, because this photo wasn't shot with this in mind, they didn't know that I was going to do this to the photo, so. And then, we just pop up some of the colors and do some fun stuff with it. So I'm going to do sort of our basic Lightroom adjustments so you guys can see my thought process. So I wanted to keep it pretty low contrast. As you can see, my final image here is like -6 on contrast, and that's because I wanted to give myself a little extra space in editing for Photoshop. I come from a film industry background, so it's sort of a long ingrained habit in me to leave some contrast out before the final color grading is done. Let's see, let's get this looking good. We can turn on our highlight warning if we want. I don't particularly care if this is overexposed, so I'm just going to ignore the red line. That's the line showing us that our highlights are clipping. You can turn that warning on and off up here in your histogram. It's the little triangle icon. And the one on the left is your shadow clipping warning. So if it was super dark, it would turn blue, and that's how you know that your shadows are clipping. But what we need to do is we need to brighten up the exposure. I'm really exposing for her face, because that's the most important thing. What was this shot at? ISO 400, that's good. That's why it still looks pretty good. So I'm just gonna get this basically where I want it. I'll go ahead and compare actually. We can bring up shadows if we want to, and then darken them back down later. Oops. And turn off our clipping warnings. That's looking pretty cool. Okay, let's work on like color. So we've got our hue, our temperature slider, sorry. I think I want to make it a little cold, because this is like cyberpunky, It's like futuristic. I feel like the future is cold. I just don't know why. That's kind of cool. I'm gonna leave the tint where it is though. Okay, moving down to the HSL tab. I'm gonna go to the luminance panel and play around these different sliders. I kind of like this red light up here being lighter. Don't want to overexpose your skin though. What is a balance? Look at the greens. The greens don't matter too much. Just gonna leave them where they are. Aquas. Blue. Okay, blue is like what's responsible for all this shininess here. I think it looks pretty cool, so I'm gonna pump the blue up a little bit. And then purples, we'll pump up a little bit. Magenta, doesn't really matter, but whatever. Okay, make sure enable profile corrections is checked on, so it'll fix any lens distortion. Okay, let's look at split toning. I'm gonna pump up the saturation way up so I can see what colors I'm actually working with. For shadows, I could go teal or I could go blue. For highlights, I could go red or orange. It's a really strong effect. Now if I hit this switch up here, I can turn this panel's effects on and off. In this case, the calibration panel. So now I'm just going to right click and say edit in Adobe Photoshop 2020, and it will load it up into Photoshop. As Anakin Skywalker says, this is where the fun begins. The main things that's going on here is we masked around her so we can show screens behind her. We load in the screens, set the layer type to screen, add an outer glow, add some blurs, add some field blurs, transform these elements so that they look cool, you know, fade it out at the top. We did some skin correction, which I might do really quick here, but I'm not gonna get into it too deep because this isn't a skin correction tutorial. So there are different ways to cut out a person in Photoshop. We're basically cutting her out and putting her on another layer on top. So that she can rest on top of some of the elements and sort of separate the 3D space of the elements. So for this, what I would do is hit W, bring up the quick selection tool, go to select subject, and just see if it gets a good selection. See what Photoshop does. Okay, that's already pretty decent. So then I would start with this selection and go in with my drawing tablet and my quick select tool, which again, the shortcut for that is W. I'm just gonna go in here and paint with the quick select tool, and it's going to add to the selection. Now Photoshop made a mistake right here, so I'm gonna hold down Alt, and I'm going to paint over this area that I don't want, and it will subtract it from my selection. And when you're using the quick select tool like this, it's better to use Alt to deselect something than to hit Control-Z or go back in history, because when you use Alt and do a negative selection, Photoshop will actually learn from it, and it will learn what you are trying to select. So it'll sort of become a little bit smarter for this photo, specifically for you. So that's why we use Alt to deselect something instead of hitting Control-Alt-Z or whatever. Although it can be tempting in areas like this. But I actually have tested this out. I tested this out the other day, and it does help to use Alt. It just gives Photoshop a better idea of what you're going for. Come on, Photoshop. Sometimes Photoshop gets this better than other times. The hair here is extremely difficult to select. I've seen a lot of tutorials about selecting hair in Photoshop where they will use a photo that makes it super easy, and I am not right now. Like, look at this. Look how the hair like blends in right here. There's no way. So I'm just gonna kind of get what I can, and then we're going to refine the mask later, and we'll see how much Photoshop picks up. Photoshop is doing a decent job, but I mean, there are ways to get around this. If you're just working on a project for yourself and it's not for a client, you can choose not to have anything like behind her hair and then it won't, you won't be able to tell that the mask sucks right here. But I'm not a fan of doing things halfway. So personally, I would rather just get it like pretty close to perfect. And this image is going on Instagram, so it doesn't have to be perfect, but it needs to be good for me to enjoy it, for me to be happy with it, with my work on it. Gotta get her fingers, and her gloves are kind of tricky too because they blend in to the background. So at some point it might be easier to just use the pen tool, honestly. It also might be better to have, oh crap, I can't do that right now. Might have been better to add a curves adjustment and add a little bit of contrast just so I can see what I'm doing a little bit better. But we will survive. The nice thing about this mask is it's non-destructive. We're just going to add it as a mask to the layer or the folder, and then we can go back and we can refine it whenever we want to. That's why I like to work in masks so often. I've basically spent the last 7 days in Photoshop just like full time working on this stuff, and it's a ton of work, but I'm learning a lot. And it's good content for YouTube tutorials too. So yeah, nothing crazy here. Let me show you guys a little trick you can do with the pen tool. So let's say I wanted to get this exact with the pen tool. I can hit P, bring up my pen tool. And even though I already have a selection going, I can start my selection. I'm clicking and dragging, by the way, to move the curves of like these points. I'm gonna zoom in, hit Alt to break that curve, hit Alt to break the curve, moving on, hit Alt, moving on. I don't actually know where her glove is, so we're just gonna go around here. Now, when I close the selection, normally, if I hit selection, okay, it's going to delete all the selection I already had. So I'm gonna Control Z to back up, or Command Z. I'm gonna go to selection again. When I have the pen tool selected, mind you, I'm going up here to make selection, click selection, and I'm going to hit add to selection. And then I'm going to feather it by maybe 1 pixel and hit OK. And now it's added to my selection, and it kept all my progress from the quick selection tool. So I can switch back and forth between these tools if I want to. So for the more difficult areas that Photoshop might not recognize, I can bring in the pen tool. Hit selection, add to selection, feather radius, a pixel or 2, depending on the size of your image. A quick selection tool might not get this very well, so I can probably get it better. Add to selection, bam. So that's, you're seeing, this is the benefit of the pen tool, is the pen tool is perfect. The benefit of the quick selection tool is that it is, needless to say, quick. So using both of them at the same time is nice. I'm gonna go over here and hit this little camera icon in my history panel, and that'll take a snapshot, and it means I can step back to any point in time, even if I run out of history, and I can always go back. So now more quick selection tool work. We're gonna deselect all this. See, look, the quick selection tool is, it doesn't get everything perfect, so we'll see how it does with this area. Not bad, not bad. I think originally I had to go in with the pen tool and get this area. I don't know if I will make a perfect selection today. I might just import my other selection, if I'm being honest. And then you guys get the idea. It's just a lot of, it's a lot of this. It's a lot of zooming in, going in with the pen tool, and making sure that you get every little detail perfect. And that's what's going to actually make your photo look good. So add to selection, feather by a pixel. And now I can deselect this area. Hey, if anybody knows how to fix this issue where I zoom in so far and it starts showing me pixels, if there's a way to turn off the grid of the pixels, please let me know. That would be fantastic. So I think it hurts more than it helps. So again, I'm just going around. Sometimes I find it's easier to use my mouse for this, and then sometimes I use my pen tool, or sorry, my drawing tablet. I am using the pen tool, but sometimes I use the drawing tablet. Hit Alt, break that curve, hit selection, feather by 1, subtract from selection, hit OK. So now we have a nice clean little selection right here because we use the pen tool. Go back in with quick select and try and get this little area. It's pretty good. Don't think that's a part of her. Ah. There you go, Photoshop. Can't even see really what this is supposed to look like, but I'm trying to get just a clean round corner here, so it just kind of looks like her knee. Even if it isn't perfect, it will look perfect because you won't really be able to tell. I'm going to go ahead and on my duplicated layer, I'm going to hit the mask button, and now I have her masked out, and it looks pretty good around most of the areas that aren't her hair. I'm going to select that again. Actually, I'm going to duplicate the background again. Select my mask by control clicking on my mask on this layer. And now I'm just going to turn off the other layers except my new layer, which is just a duplicated layer with the selection. I'm going to hit W and hit select and mask up at the top. And now we are going to hit Smart Radius, and I'm just going to refine this a little bit and see what Photoshop gets. Right now, I'm sort of looking for the hair. So this layer, I'm sort of just focusing on her hair right now. Okay, that's looking really nice right up here. It looks okay here. Here we're showing a little bit too much, and here, but I sort of like this. This is at 87 pixels on the radius with Smart Radius checked. So let's try out some other stuff. I'm just gonna try out some different radiuses here. So I went in with this tool here, and I'm holding down Alt to like paint negative. So I'm just deselecting some areas that I don't want. Now I'm going to go back to Smart Radius and crank it up. See how we're looking. So I'm going to output this to the layer mask and hit OK. So now we have this mask, which obviously looks terrible like around her arms and stuff, but that's why we made the other layer. And then we have this mask for her hair, which again isn't perfect, but it's going to look pretty good. So I'm just gonna call this hair mask, and then we'll group these, Control G or Command G to group. Call this Steffie or model or whatever. Then we have our background, which I'll duplicate again for good measure. I'm going to go ahead on this layer, and I'm just going to get rid of everything that isn't her hair. So I'm just gonna hit select a mask, and I'm gonna feather it a little bit. Control Shift I to invert it, and then hit I'll hit X and D a couple times to make black my background color, and then I'll hit Control Delete when I'm on the mask, and it's gonna delete all the area outside. Well, it's not deleting it, but it's filling it with black, so it's not showing up. I can always go and paint in with white on my layer mask, and it will bring it back. Okay, and then for this layer, I'm just gonna get rid of this area. So now when we add them together, we get the full picture. And we have our background. Okay, we still need to do frequency separation and stuff, and we still need to do dodge and burn, and some clone stamping, and a ton of crap. Okay, I think before we go any further, we should do some clone stamping, some clone stamp work. So I'm gonna go ahead, make a new layer, group it. We'll call the group CS for clone stamp. I'm gonna right click and make it yellow just so I can remember what's what. Gonna go in with my clone stamp tool, set to current and below layers, opacity 100%, and we're gonna clean up some of the blemishes on her face and her suit and stuff like that. Gonna use this spot healing brush tool actually on some of this stuff. Shortcut for that is J, it's right over here. And with the spot healing brush, you don't even have to define a source. You just paint and it fixes stuff. I have it set to I have it set to sample all layers, so it'll sample what's below this. This isn't like always the best tool to use for skin touch-up. I just use it for like noticeable blemishes. And do the same thing to like these dust particles on her jacket and stuff. So before and after, much better. What should we do now? We can do some quick skin retouching, and then after that we'll get into the sci-fi panels. Probably go ahead and set up a new folder for dodge and burn. Rename it to dodge and burn. Make it yellow. Go up here to my adjustments panel, or I can go down here and select curves. It'll add a curves adjustment inside this folder. And I'm just going to bring my curves up a bit. This is going to be my dodge layer. And then I'll duplicate that layer and name it burn. And on the burn layer, I'm just going to bring the curves down from the center a bit. And I'm going to hit Control Delete to fill both of these with black so they're not actually affecting the image yet. Now I'll go on my dodge layer. I'll get a completely soft brush. I'll put my flow somewhere between 1% and 4%. We can try 2% for now. And I'm just going to fix any areas that are too dark. Actually, before we do that, make another layer. Fill it with white, set the layer to color. Make another curves adjustment. This is just going to be temporary so we can see what we're working on a little bit better. Going into my dodge layer now, and I'm just painting on the areas that are too dark to flatten them out. So we're not changing the texture, we're not doing anything destructive. All we're doing is we're brightening up dark areas on a curves layer. And we can always go back in with the brush tool and set it to black to delete our progress, because white reveals on a mask and black hides. Basically, we're just going through, just gonna soften this all up a little bit. Nothing too crazy. It takes a little bit of practice to get this right. Probably a month, but you'll get used to it. Okay, so if we go back look at our before and after for our dodge layer. That's what we've done so far. So we've just made it a little bit cleaner looking. Can do the same thing on our burn layer. Paint with white. Put flow at like 30%. And we'll just darken down any areas that are too bright. So I could darken down this area a little bit. Can also use this on the hair to give it some more dimension. So I might go in with burn and hit like some of the dark areas to darken them down even more, and then go in with dodge and dodge some of the bright areas just to make them more exciting. Okay, so let's turn off our adjustment layers, temporary. We'll turn on and off our dodge and burn. So there's our before, there's our after, before, after, before, after, before, after. So we added a little bit of dimension to our hair, which looks kind of sweet. Then we evened out like some of the shadows that were on our face. Okay, and we can also do frequency separation, but I think for this tutorial, her face already looks pretty great anyways. We don't really need it. Let's go ahead and talk about the screens. Okay, so come on, Photoshop. So here's where we are. Here's where we need to get to. So these screens are not free. The ones I used were in like a $20 pack, I think on Video Hive. It was actually a pack of videos. So, but you can find some free ones online if you just search like high-tech sci-fi screens or HUD display, you know, sci-fi. You might be able to find some images that will work. Make sure that you find them against like a black background or a dark background so you can screen them in. I'll show you how to do that right now. But basically what I would do here, I'm in Adobe Bridge, by the way, but it doesn't matter what program you use to find your files. Basically what I would do here is I'd find one that I like, and then I would drag it into Photoshop. Okay, so I drag the video in to Photoshop. My timeline pops up down here. If you don't see this, go to Window Timeline. And then I scrub through, I find a place in the video I like. I go to my layer, I right click, I hit rasterize layer. It's going to make it into an image and not a video. Now I can drag it into my scene. Hit OK, close. Okay, now we have this in here. Let's go ahead and make a new folder for our heads-up display or sci-fi screen. So I'm just going to call it heads-up display screens. I'm going to make this blue. Drag this in here. Okay. So now we've thrown this folder behind our mask layers. So now if I scale this up, it's behind her. So there's a couple of different ways you can blend this into the scene. You can go to the blend type and the layer and hit normal and then bring it down to screen, and it will get rid of the black because it will only show colors that are lighter than the colors below it on the layers below it. So that looks pretty cool, but then when I go to FX outer glow, I try to add my outer glow, it adds it to the sides, and it's weird. I want it to be added to the individual elements. So instead what I will do is I'll go in here with the magic wand tool, which is up here where the quick selection tool is, hit, I don't know, tolerance maybe 30 or so, or even less, and then I'll select the black, and then I will hit delete. And I'll literally just delete it. I'm gonna hit Control L to bring up my levels. I'm gonna drag this slider to make sure everything is like basically either light gray or white. Hit OK. Now when I go add my outer glow, it adds it to the individual elements here, see? So it looks much cooler. We actually have the glow on the inside of the element now. So I'm just gonna play around with the range. Like this is too much, too little range, but if I drag it up, and my size all the way up, my opacity all the way up, blend mode is set to screen, then I can play around with it and find a nice little happy medium. This looks pretty cool. And then I can throw these anywhere. I mean, I can throw these behind her. And we could say like we want this to be behind her on this like cylindrical wall. So we could free transform and then right click and go to warp. And then sort of warp this around. You get the idea. And then we'll go in, hit the mask button on our layer, and we'll paint with black, flow 100, opacity 100. And we're just going to get rid of areas that we don't want on this specific layer. So I might bring my opacity down to like 30% or 50. And I'm just gonna blend this stuff out. Let's see, I might go in with the pen tool here and like actually take my time and get a nice little selection. And like that, hit selection, feather radius 2 pixels, and then hit X, Control delete to delete it from my mask. So now it's like stuck inside here, right? Could even make this like down there maybe. Double click on my mask, feather, 2 pixels, hit OK, just to blend it in a little bit. Make sure to save your project a lot, guys. You don't want to lose your work. It's kind of cool. I'm not a big fan of this. So I'm just going to soften it up. That's not bad. Okay, so that's like our first screen, right? So as you can see, I just go through and I add a lot of different stuff to it. So I'll show you how I do that now. But yeah, I would recommend go and find like yourself a nice little HUD screens pack like this. I do believe this was like $20, and I've gotten a lot of good use out of it. So okay, right click, hit rasterize, drag it over here. Hit yes, hit OK. Right click on the timeline, hit close. Okay, we're going to rotate, hit enter. I'm going to duplicate this a couple of times. And then if I want my glow from the other layer, I will just hold down Alt and drag the glow up here, and it's going to copy it from my other layer while it's still on my original HUD screens layer. So you can just copy glows like that. It makes it a lot easier. I can also double click on the glow, bring the range up a bit to make it softer. I can bring the opacity of my whole layer down a little bit so it's not like super distracting from the subject, you know? Because we don't necessarily want it to be super bright out on the edges of the photo. And then I can just go in here, line it up, expand this up a little bit. And then let's say that I want this to look like it's closer to the camera. That's pretty easy to do. So first things first, I'm actually going to trim this layer to where I want it to be, which is right about there. Select and mask, feather 3 pixels, and then Alt click on the mask icon and it will mask it out. Okay. So let's say, what did it look like over here? That's pretty cool. Okay, so let's make it look like that. So to make this look like it's perspective, I'm just gonna hold down Control when I'm transforming this and drag this point at the top down here like that. And I've also got to drag this point a bit. Come on, zoom out. Can make it equal, you know? Okay, let's see how that's looking. That's looking pretty good. Okay. And now I can go in here and there's two different ways to do this. You can go to filter blur or filter blur gallery field blur, and you can blur it. If you want to be able to change the blur later, you go to filter, convert for smart filters, and then you go to field blur. But I'm more concerned about saving space and making my project run fast. So I'm just gonna do it once and for all, because I know kind of what I want. I'm just gonna look for something that looks cool. And then I'll hit my preview button up here to toggle the blur on and off to see how it's looking. If you want this to look like less like boxy, you can go into the mask and paint with black and just delete maybe the lines up at the top. Again, I can go back in and paint with white on my mask to like make her hair more solid, but it's not even looking bad right now. So there's no reason to refine her like hair mask until something looks off, and then I'll spend the time to refine it. But right now there's just no reason. That's pretty cool. I don't know what to do with this one. Oh, okay, that's pretty sweet. So we have the screens behind her already that give some nice separation and stuff, but we need to add the ones that are in front of her. I can go in here and apply some of these layer masks and rasterize the layer styles if I'm good with the glow and I don't need to change it anymore. And that will help my project to be a little bit smaller. So now I'm going to just hit the mask button down here on this layer, and I'm going to go in with my brush. We'll set the flow to like 25%, and I'm going to paint with black. And I'm going to just use a soft brush and get rid of the areas that are distracting. You can see what that work did. That only took about 30 seconds, but it makes it so we still have elements in front of her, but they're only in the places that look okay. Now we also need to clean up all of this. So I'm just gonna go in with the lasso tool here, and we're gonna make just sort of a rough selection, go to select and mask, and I'm just gonna feather it out by, I'll probably feather it by like 20 pixels. No, too much, we'll do 15, and we'll hit OK. And then I'm going to hit X and D on my keyboard a couple times, hit X until my swatch in the back is black, and then I'll hit Control Delete to fill the mask with black. That way we get rid of all that junk at the top. So now if I turn this layer on and off, it looks like this. Of course, we could also add a little bit of color here. One thing that we can do that might be pretty fun and easy is we can go up here and hit gradient map. Whoa, that's crazy. I actually need to reverse this. And then for the white color on the right, whoop, I'm gonna hit a red, sort of like that. That's fine for now. We'll hit screen. And then I'm going to isolate it, the lasso tool. Now we will go in, hit W, hit select and mask, and bring up this feather. Bring that way up. We'll try 600 pixels and see how that works. And now if we Control Shift I to select the inverse and we Control Delete, we'll paste black on the rest of the mask. So now we're just left with this area looking red, and it almost looks like this light up here is lighting up our subject and some of our screens here. And we can add another one, just have it affect our screen here. Okay, so now we have a gradient map that we have just affecting our HUD screen. The way I did that is I hit this little button right here, and that makes it only affect the layer directly below it, or the folder directly below it. And then I have another gradient map on top of everything. Oops. Or do I? Where did it go? Well, that's looking pretty cool. It's looking pretty cool. Yeah, so if I wanted to add like color to any of this stuff, I could probably go in with my brush tool, set it to color, sample a color I want to paint with, and make a new layer for this. Set the layer to color, then just make it only affect the layer below it. Turn the opacity up a bit. There we go. So to do that, we painted on a layer, a new layer, painted red. We held down Alt, and we clicked right over here. And that way it only affects the layer below it. And then we just mess with the opacity to get it looking how we want. And we can even mask it out and say, oh, we changed our mind, we don't want it there. And now we're just affecting like the top up here. So that's kind of cool. Another cool thing you can do. So let's look at our original image and what we have. So in the original image, it's a bit brighter. We did some more skin retouching. We just have more elements all around. Another thing I did is I added curves, and then I just brought the top down to flatten out the highlights just a little bit. But anyways, I hope that you guys had fun watching this tutorial. So here's what we started with. Here is what we ended up with. Just to recap, we did our basic color correction in Lightroom. After that, we right-clicked on the image and we said edit in Adobe Photoshop CC 2020. It loaded it up into Photoshop. We did the next thing that you should do anyways is your skin retouching and your clone stamping. So we use the spot healing brush tool, which is right up here. Shortcut for that is J, and a new layer. And we went all around and we fixed, you know, any like blemishes or any dust particles or any spots that stood out to us. After that, we went ahead and we did dodge and burn. You could also do frequency separation at this point just to brighten up the certain areas of the face selectively. Then I would recommend that you make a new layer from all those previous layers. You combine them all by merging layers, and then you have your new background. You duplicate it, you hit W, you go up to select subject, and then Photoshop is going to do its best to try and select the subject for you. It'll get it decent, and then from there you use a mixture of the quick select tool and the pen tool to get a perfect selection. After that, you can group your model's layers into a folder, add that selection as a mask to that folder, and then you put all of your elements, your high-tech screens and stuff, below that, and that way it will show up behind your model, like so, like how this is behind our model, like right here, and then add one or two on top to make it look like it's a more 3D scene. Then we just went in and we added a lot of field blurs. So we blurred basically everything slightly. and then just masks on each layer, deciding, where we want each layer to fall, what parts we want to get rid of, and we painted black on those masks to get rid of the parts of each layer that we didn't like. And then after that, the only thing that's left is to do, honestly, a little bit of color correction. I like to use a color balance adjustment, go to my shadows, and just play around with them until I get something that looks really cool. You go to the highlights and play around with that too. And then if you look at our before and after for our color correction, it's looking pretty awesome. Maybe tone it down just a little bit. So I think that just about sums up how to pull off a super high-tech sci-fi screens, Blade Runner-esque sort of futuristic photo like this. If you guys had any questions, if I forgot anything, put it in the comments below, and I will try to get back with you and answer your question in a timely manner. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. If you found it helpful, if you could subscribe and or share this video, that would be a massive help to me so I can continue making videos like this. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. Go do some awesome crap in Photoshop, and I'll catch you guys on the flippity flip.